Can you state your full name for me?
Tirrell Greene.
Okay. And where are we?
You're at Kingdom Harvest Bible Way Church, known as The Harvest, on Statesville Road in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay, awesome. And then I'm going to ask you some questions about your hand map, and then we'll get into some more demographic questions, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so you have there your hand map. Do you want to discuss what it is that you wrote? You don't have to, again, give any information that you don't want. But yeah, share some information that's on your hand map.
I think probably the thing that kind of made me think the most was the lines in the middle of the hand, and I approached it from a life phase. You know, I have the three major lines, and I kind of put my life in phases. And in my hand, there are of the three lines, there are two that start off pretty even and go downhill, and then there's one that goes, starts off even and goes uphill. The first two I put as the first two phases of life, and those are things that I started off pretty well, but then went down because of various situations. Doesn't mean that I didn't have any wins or victories, but overall some type of event or some type of lack in my processes allowed me to go down. And again, fail is a strong word, but in my mind and how I approach things, I failed. To where then the last phase, which is on the top of my hand, which kind of starts off even and goes up, is now my opportunity to use those resources and those things that I've learned throughout my life, and to now look for a positive end as I look into the next phase of life, and probably the last phase of my life.
Okay. What caught your attention?
What caught with my attention is I don't think about these things on a regular basis. So it was very difficult to manage how I feel about something that has been so quiet and so, it's, you may fluff and tell people how you feel, but when you begin to write about it and begin to really think about it, it's difficult to put on paper and to put into words. So I think there are some, and that's why I left the finger without anything on it, because there's just some things you really you can't explain.
Okay. What feelings did you get when you thought about the COVID-19 pandemic?
The feelings I got, the two words I put change and pain. And there was a great change in how life is presented. Even to the point where a lot of times when things have happened, there is a sense of normalcy that allows you to get back to a place where you're comfortable. This has not been the case for me, where I'm comfortable, which is not a bad thing, but it's just, you're a state of preparedness that it can happen again. And I think you begin if any wisdom, you begin to make some changes so that if something like this happens, again, being a pastor, being not able to be with the parishioners, the church kind of spreading out, how do I make sure that, if something like this happens again, that we're prepared to serve one another, serve the community, and to be more impactful when these challenging times will come the next time around.
Interesting. So do you feel like, what I heard you say is comfortability, are you saying that you haven't been able to find a comfortable space yet?
I never, even in before COVID, I would always push myself not to be comfortable. This one though is you're pressed into it. So no matter what happens, you have to change. Everybody had to change something during this time, and everybody felt something, even if it wasn't personal. The news, you felt something and probably had some pain that went along with it.
So who surrounded you? What was your support system like?
My support system, again, because of the nature of this pandemic, our family system, tended to be the first source, because you couldn't really reach out to anybody besides social media, which I'm not a big social media person. And so I had to rely on my family. We had to hang together. We had to communicate, my wife and my children. And, and before in our case, before the pastor passed away, he was at my house quite often. So that was a support system that I think was the greatest, was my family. And, making sure that we were all, kind of okay, even though it wasn't okay.
Okay, so what is your preferred pronouns?
Tirrell. I'm very informal. So I don't get into Mr. even Pastor, just, Tirrell.
So if I would refer to you on paper, he, him, they?
Oh, he, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Make sure. Okay. Where is home for you right now?
Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay. And where were you born?
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
How long have you been in the Charlotte area?
Going on close to 20 years.
Okay. We're about the same in that. I've been there about 20 years.
Yeah, you was born here, no?
Basically, I was born in Little Rock.
Okay, that's right. I do remember that.
I was born in Little Rock too, but it's kind of iffy. It's not about me, but yeah. Okay, so I know we already touched on it previously, but describe your experience the last 2 years. More after the COVID-19 pandemic, and where I'm interested, if you give me permission, I know something big for you is that you had to take over the church because your pastor passed from COVID-19.
Yes.
But would you mind going into that and what that was like?
Yeah. And I guess it kind of predates. I came to this church about 10 years ago, and the pastor and I really became really great. Not only what I needed a friend, and not somebody to judge me, not somebody to, not so much I didn't want correction, but I needed a friend, somebody that understood, and he was a very relational guy, and through that process over the past 10, 11 years, we have became close friends, and never thought that I would be in the position that I'm in today as a pastor. I've always been kind of behind the scenes type person. But because of this pandemic, in July of 2020, a person that used to come to my house during the COVID pandemic, I used to be on the patio cooking out almost every day. I had a little gym area in my garage that he would come and use a couple times a week. So we were always interacting, even during the time when most folks, they said, hey, you shouldn't be doing it. And we went from that to, 2 weeks, he got COVID, we talked for a week, and he went to the hospital one weekend, and the next, he got out on a Sunday. Monday we spoke, Tuesday we spoke, and that was the last conversation we had, was a Tuesday. He asked me to do something for him on Wednesday via text. And that was the last conversation we had. And by that Monday, he had passed away. So it was a traumatic time. But right before then, I was making a decision, either going back to law school and become an attorney, or going back and getting something in ministry, biblical studies. And so, I was vacillating back and forth, and so of course I talked to him about it, and he was like, hey man, go back and get your degree. And because of some philosophical ideas that I had, I was very apprehensive of what school I went to, because I wanted them to teach me what I wanted to know. But thankfully, he told me, go to the school and learn for yourself. And that's what I had to do. And so it provided a great anchor for, I wanted to be a chaplain for a sports team, now end up being a pastor of a church. So, but he was definitely a catalyst for me to do that. And again, I started in May and he died in July. And so, for the most part of my time in getting my master's degree, it was, because of the push that he gave me. So it was definitely a challenging time, and then stepping into a role of pastor, which the church voted on. I wasn't sure it was going to be me, and and I was okay if it wasn't me. But God saw fit at this point in time, and I'm still learning how to deal with it and wrestling with some things. But I think going back to school has been a great help for this position and this time and this season that we're in, and learning how to do things a little bit different and be more relational in a church environment, especially a black church environment.
Well, congratulations are in order to, and one, because I know it's hard to start school,
Yeah.
and starting that in this pandemic is really difficult. And then it does still feel weird to say congratulations after, having to take over from, someone that passed away, but the fact that your congregation and peers trust you to lead them speaks a lot to you and the work that you've put in. So I do congratulate you for that and be grateful to your prayers.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're so welcome, so welcome. So there was a lot of follow-up questions out like of that because you're very open. And when you talk about your curriculum and what you're learning, especially during these times, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to frame it. Do you want to go in, or can you go into rather, what are you learning to, I guess, become the leader that you think that your flock need now, especially in the post-pandemic climate or pandemic climate? Well,
I think one of the main things that I'm learning is that I need to learn. I need to unlearn. I need to relearn. That is in school, I think that's one of the, probably, if you ask me 5 things that I really picked up, after I got past that, hey, you gotta learn this information, but it needs to be understood that information has to be disseminated, and a lot of times how you get information and where you get it from are the main things, but having the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn has been a great help in this time of life. That nothing I have, or there's not anything I know that I won't put through the test. Besides, again, even in Christ, you have to unlearn, because some things that you learn along the way have not been right, and you have to unlearn them and find out who He is and what He's all about. And so I don't have many things in my life that I say, hey, I'm solid. No, I'm open, I'm understanding, and I know God is good. I know those things that we can always say, but how is He good to me? I'm still learning, relearning, and unlearning some things that I thought was good before, really may not be good now, or I may have had the wrong information to understand who He is and what God is all about.
I love how you said how He's been good to me, because even in this exercise too, when we talk about it, we're just oh, He's good to me, but there's really good things that we can say how He's been good to me too. So yes. And sometimes even in that revealing process, so that's cool. So how has your friendships and family relationships changed during the pandemic?
Ooh, well, again, the main theme in this story is, becoming a pastor impacts everybody. Impacts my wife, impacts my children, and that was a great question when this whole process started. How is it going to impact, and how is it going to change things? I want you to know that everything I thought was absolutely wrong. I am still learning to be a little bit more flexible, because I don't know, even my wife and I spoke about it. We think we understand our feelings and our emotions and how we will respond to things. But in reality, when you start getting into this process, this mode of life, you begin to see how it impacts, almost every aspect of your life, because people expect more out of you. That when you say, hey, I'm a pastor, or they expect you to be almost perfect because you're a pastor. There's a my wife is, also working on making sure that she's, maintaining the level of expectation for those that, she's leading and those that look up to her. So it has definitely been a change that has been pushed, propelled by the role. And just like I guess most jobs that most people go on their first day, they assume that this company is a wonderful company. I'm walking in, I have a great desk, everything is well. I know the pitfalls of this job, and then you find out 5 months later that it's nothing like you thought it was going to be. And that's what it is about being a pastor. It's nothing like, in all honest preparation, I don't know if I'm capable, and I won't speak for anybody else, of being prepared for what has occurred in the last 2 years.
And that's something too, because so in what you do and what I do, both of us are front facing occupations, and we're representing the public. And what we found is like you have to evolve with the times, and that can question who you are, as a person, what you stand on, what you believe in, because now you have to, adapt to a whole different world. Now your wife is a nurse, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now how was that? Because I know that pretty early days were probably scary.
Well, the crazy part for her is, and this is and I hope she doesn't mind me telling the story. She had applied for a position several times, and this is very unique. And they had turned her down. They had brought somebody else. She was applying for the chief nurse for this area here in Charlotte, and they turned her down on it might even be up to 3 times. She wasn't. They said she wasn't qualified or some type of issue. And it always seemed to be, my wife, being from the islands, always didn't identify with, some of the racial issues that we have in this country, because where she's from, everybody she knows is like her. So their expectation, their belief system is a little bit different than ours. And never having experienced somebody, that may be, literally holding you back because of you're a woman, because of your color, or because they just may not like you. And whatever that reason was, it was never proven. But up until that time, she didn't get the job. COVID happened, and she became basically the leader of the for the Veterans Affairs in Charlotte. She became the point of contact for managing this area of concern, from the tents outside to starting the process of making sure that people can come to the VA safely. She was the catalyst for that, and because of the COVID, she was and in my mind, that and how she responded to it, she ended up, doing a wonderful job in a difficult time, and that led her to being promoted to where she is right now as chief nurse in the Charlotte area.
Oh, that's awesome. Congratulations to her.
Yeah.
That's cool. So did that, and I hope maybe I'll get the chance to sit down and talk to her. Did that kind of cause a little bit like a pressure to like implement like protocols and guidelines for when y'all met in person? Like, did she ever feel that pressure of people coming to her as a nurse saying what's going on?
Absolutely. She's always in the loop and always in the point of, hey, what's going on, what you got going on here, and how should we approach this? And the funny thing is, you say the church had higher standards than everybody else. The church, you had to be, it was more difficult to come to church than it was to go anywhere else in this world. And that was crazy. And even today, if something happens in church, someone coughs, we're expected to shut down. We're expected to, be wise. But everything else you can do, everywhere else you can go, as long as it's not talking about God, then, hey, you know what? You're okay to do it. So that's just a little side thing that I found out to be kind of like strange. You can go anywhere, be anywhere, do anything, but when it comes to church, if you get sick in church, then God is bad and everybody in church is bad, and we're foolish for coming here.
Mm-hmm. So you felt the pressure too when trying to meet with the congregations versus other spaces that you experienced, where you felt like the protocol wasn't as tight, to meet in person.
Absolutely. I mean, the church definitely, because of. And again, I want to be careful, because I do believe that it was a season of time that we need to be apart, and so people would not be sick. But I also believe that there was a season of time that we missed because we were afraid of what other people thought about us and how we would be judged because of our convictions.
So that also brings me to another interesting point. Did you feel that there was an extra what's the word I'm looking for? That the church may have gained an extra responsibility of making sure that its congregation, its needs were met, like whether it's food, cleaning supplies, make sure they were okay, especially in the loss of y'all's pastor.
And I think that, not only that, and you raise a wonderful point, and that's one of the things that in ministry I am wrapping my arms around it. Not only the physical needs, but the mental health needs. There are conditions and issues that people deal with Again, in my belief of the source of sin and what has happened in the beginning, is it still there? Absolutely. But has God provided some provisions, some doctors, some counseling, some information that will help us maintain and manage some of these situations along the way? That, how to deal with stress, how to deal with anxiety, how to deal with, those that may be suffering from food insecurities or being unhoused. Those are now conditions that we really need to, tap into as a community, as a body of Christ, that God has given us excellent wisdom in his word. And we have to begin to use those things for the betterment of our communities, and not just for the uplifting of a pastor or a group of people that now sit on top of this mountain. It's about the whole group. It's about, all of us coming together and using our expertise to further the gospel of Christ in those areas that will allow us to show, be it homelessness or whatever it may be, it allows us to show our care and what God has given us through his word, and to begin to walk out some of these actions.
So we've kind of touched on this already. Is there something, and I'm thinking not just programs, but maybe ministries and programs, but also when I talk about the virtual experience, what is something new that came out of the pandemic? Do you still prioritize virtual services, or is there a new ministry, that a benevolent ministry too, that maybe startup that is kind of an extension of the post shutdown?
Man, I am so glad you asked me about that. Because so one of the unique things that happened, and again, I'm stepping into a place of a great foundation. Nothing that, and I want to be very clear, this is not Tirrell Greene. This is those that have gone before me, have set up some things that have really allowed us to take the next step. So what happened to build up to what I'm going to tell you is the pastor of the church, we bought this property. They bought it, I don't know how many years ago, but the church was actually built here in 2013. And we're sitting on about 2.5 acres for the church. But the pastor thought it was necessary to, continue to buy property. So he bought the property next to us, which is another, almost 3 acres. And then, and that was in 2014 or 15. And then he bought the property next to that, which is, another 2.5 acres. And Lord willing, in the next couple of weeks, we'll be buying a property next to that. Through what he did and how everything worked out, we were able to pay off the mortgage, where we are debt free as a church and an organization. We will be getting back in debt to pay for the next property, but again, that's a good investment for us as a church. Again, being wise, being fiscally responsible, and understanding what is going on in the Charlotte area at this point in time. But from that, what we have accomplished, there is 2 houses that have been set up on the property. During the last 2 years, we have rehabbed both houses. And the one house we rented out to a Spanish congregation, so they're able to come and worship and to be, again, be in a city and in a country that allows them to worship God, the one God, as we all should be doing. And then the other house that we have rehabbed and we have made into a food pantry, a clothing closet, and there is room for classrooms in that house. So now because of that, every other week we are having a food pantry giveaway for those in the community, and now we also have an ability to give work clothes away and then sell gently used clothes to help make sure that our food pantry is full with the resources it needs. And not only that, we also started a community garden because we needed fresh food, fresh fruits. Our area that we are in a food desert area where, we don't always get the best produce and the best products that will stimulate learning, education, things of that nature. So we have, set our sights on, food, clothing, and having at some point having some type of class and mentorship programs that will allow our community to continue to grow and to be successful.
That's awesome. So, because it sounds like to me that when I hear you talk, that there's some importance in maintaining like a legacy, not only for like the memory of your pastor, but also for for your congregation. And kind of talk about that in the beginning when we talk about not being comfortable. So I guess I would ask, what continues to drive you? Because that's a lot in the span of 3 years.
Well, there's, and so now, my convictions, God saved me, God delivered me, God's still working on me. And in the process of being in school, in the process of learning and educating myself, there's a mission, there's a purpose to my life. There's a purpose greater than just walking in the doors and coming to church and running around the church and shouting. There's a purpose, there's a greater purpose of souls that need to see Christ. They may not come to church. The only way they may see us is through those activities and actions that we are serving, and we are serving basically the hands and feet of Christ. It's not us, it's not me personally, but I'm a part of a bigger picture that if, we love you, we serve you, we help you. And not only, it's not just for those that are poor or those that are having problems, but even people that have money, they have issues also. And if we're able to connect and let them know that what we're connecting because God has required us to connect, that God is love, and this is the mission to let them understand what the total purpose, the gospel of Jesus Christ is. That's what drives everything I do, because I want to fulfill my part of the mission, my little lane. I want to make sure that, the area that I'm working on and the group that he's given us, we're first of all part of the bigger picture, but we're not the breach. We're not the people who are not doing what they're supposed to do, and the enemy is gaining traction. And again, that's when you realize spiritually, as a pastor, you do look at COVID on a spiritual terms of, why did God allow this to happen? What can the church do that, hey, in the midst of this, the enemy is going ravaging people and destroying lives. What can we bring to the table that even in the worst of times, that people can see the love of Christ in their lives? And that's what drives, me until I probably go on. I'm not perfect, but I want to make sure that, people know that the reason why I'm doing this is because God loves me, and I want you to know that God loves you also.
Okay. Well, so that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Now, we did talk about your wife too. You have 3 boys?
No, I have 2 boys and a girl.
And a girl. Okay, that's right. How did you have to support them as they got ready for transition into schools, college, prom? How did you remain a pillar for them?
And I said, it was a difficult time. I think, it was a hand that you played from day to day. You couldn't get prepared for the next step because you just didn't know the next step. My son, graduated with, we went to, it was actually kind of thought-provoking. My middle son graduated this Saturday, and my other son came in town and said, hey, this is the first graduation I was able to go to, because he didn't have, he had a virtual graduation. Matter of fact, it was a ride-through graduation. And, so he never had an opportunity to have that moment in time. We as parents never had that opportunity to celebrate our child making it through and going. So, he was able still to get a scholarship to go to school. He struggled in school a bit more probably than had it been fully operational, someone keeping eyes on him. But because of what COVID did to the college campus, to sports, he kind of got into a little fog, and it was he was away from home, no one really watching him, and he suffered because of that. But in that, I was able to support him, making sure that he had the things that he necessary for him to survive, the support, even though I didn't always agree with what he did. But, I was still here as a dad, and hey, whatever the problems are, you can come to me, and we're going to support you. Even as he transferred schools, we supported him. My middle son, he kind of went into a self-isolation. He did his schoolwork, and there was no problem with school whatsoever. But, people, friends were foreign to him. And, I just encouraged him to, I knew what he was before. He was a social kid. Now he's finally getting out of it. The last probably 6 to 8 months, he's becoming more social, getting back, even in graduation, they're running up to him, EJ. And that's what happened when he was in middle school. That was the same scenario. So he's getting back to who he is. My daughter, I think she's a people person. I think she struggled a little bit But now that she's back into it, and because I think young people adapt easier than older ones, I don't think it had much damage to on her, because she was still in the 2 years ago she was in second grade. She hadn't learned how to consistently go to school all the time, and so they forget and they move on, and I think they're resilient. So just again, the prayers, making sure I'm not going crazy, gave them an idea of how, and my wife also gave them an idea. We have to work, we had to transition. There's things that we have to do different, and hopefully those things that and how we responded will allow them to respond in the same way, even as they meet their next challenge or difficulties in life.
Thank you so much for that too. A side note too, I work with teens primarily in programming, and they are not alone in that experience. We saw that with the age of social media, that teens were already going through isolation, and the pandemic did nothing but elevate that crisis. So let me know if you need resources.
Yeah. And that's what the funny thing is, that's what the best tactic of the enemy in any warfare is, to isolate. And so COVID allowed the country to isolate, and it's just a setup. I think it's going to come again. They know that they can now give a command to keep us indoors. And again, I'm not all the way a conspiracist. I am a Bible heaven last time one. But they're going to do it. They know that they can do it now. They know they can mobilize us. They can keep us out the stores, keep us away from one another. And that is the most damaging thing we can do, is to be separate, because when we're separate, the enemy can tell us anything. And then it's, who do we reference it against? That's why it's coming together is so important, that we have to begin to and be so relational that nothing separates us. And because of how we build our houses now, because of our communities, we are so easily segregated. And I think it's proving itself here in this country, opposed to other countries that can, even though they had high death rates, they recover faster because they're together, they're community. And so that's why they were dying. It wasn't because they were stupid, it's because they're family. And we're dying. We didn't die here because we're isolated. People died because they were isolated. So.
Okay, so that actually brought me to another question. So, officially now, I want to be correct, because I'm not sure if it's the CDC or the president or if they're both, but so the pandemic has been officially declared over. Mm-hmm. Does that give you any relief? How do you feel about that?
No, I mean it's again, we got to look forward. We do have memories. We hopefully learn from them, but we have to move forward and prepare for whatever's coming next, good or bad. I don't want to be a negative, but you got to prepare for good things too, that you don't get it becomes so good that you don't respond properly. And in the same way, it can't be so bad that you give up. So I want to be prepared for whatever's coming, to be closer, to be more tightly connected, to be more educated, to find ways to resolve. I joke around. I said I need some land to be able to farm. That's why we got the garden, to get some chickens, because you just don't know. And again, that's what the land is all about, is provision. God has given us the possession to provide for us. And now we let everyone do everything else for us. We can't do anything for ourselves. If Food Line shuts down, we're stuck. And that's pretty. That's a scary place to be.
Absolutely. I have 3 more questions. Three.
That's fine.
How has this experience shaped you as a person?
As a person, I am this is a strange response, and I probably shouldn't say it, but I'm looking for something. This it has shaped me, that there's and I don't there's something out there as is in humanity that I want to see, feel, experience. And it's nothing crazy, nothing that I'm trying to, I'm not, trying to go to the end of the world, and it's not a feeling of pleasure, but there's just something that, I want to experience, that the depths of humanity is really good, and that the spirit of people is really good, and that, we have that real love, and not tied into because of what you're doing to me, but because I care, because I think that you're, I do this, and it doesn't have to be, validated by your orientation, or validated by a pleasure thing, but it's just something that is good for the soul, almost like a Campbell soup commercial. But in reality, this is just something good for the soul, and not have to be, hey, well, because I feel this way, I got to have sex, or I got to call it a relationship, or I got to frame it as something, except it just feels right, and it's good because it is right and it is good.
What do you think the future will look like?
The future is the future is balanced out. Some things very, very, I think some good things are going to happen, and I think there's going to be some tragic things that are going to happen. And I probably look at the end of it being more tragic than good. When we cannot understand that one thing leads to another, and there's nothing that is in isolation alone. So whatever we're doing, good or bad, that if this is where it is today, it's not going to be there tomorrow. It's going to be once you, any time, human nature is, once you do it and you've experienced it, you judge it. And if you think there's something out there more for you to experience, you're going after it. And it may not be legal, it may not be, okay, but whatever you do, and the same thing if it's something good, which allows us to be good, but the enemy has blinded our eyes, and I, not to sound over spiritual, but anything that we do, the discipline, the challenges of life, it's just what I want to do, and I've never seen it all the way. Somebody that lives on passion turn out good.
You said that someone that usually lives on passion?
Yeah, somebody lives on passion, generally their passion is going to step on somebody else's toes, feet. For them it may feel good and great, but most times passion does not allow you to have that connection with others.
Are you speaking from a humanity type?
Humanity, individually, collectively, nothing that we do in any sector, if not manage, maintain, learn, unlearn, do we ever come out on the good if we just stick and say, hey, this feels good, and I'm going to go to the next feel good thing, and I'm going to go to the next feel good thing. There's something that's going to be missing.
Do you have any additional stories or experiences to share about your experience with COVID-19 that we haven't covered?
Probably that I'm sure I have a lot of things. But I think that the thing that's probably, and I'll say this, I think the divide in the country it was there, and I think sitting there looking at news and allowing us to hear two sides of a story has really separated this country. Those that allow people to speak to their lives, unfortunately, are the ones that are outspoken. If you don't take time to read or to look for yourself and not realize that everybody has an opinion, including the pastor, and you have to know things for yourself so you'll be able to gauge it, I think that's probably the thing that, one of the major things that people have become more political, more less understanding of other people's views. It's either I like you, either I like everything about this, or I don't like anything about it. And so I think it has become more absolute, and and how we live life, and you have to be, manage your space very, very well, and who comes into your space. And and again, not turning anybody away, but understand when I draw close to you how I have to deal with you. I'm not for, hey, will you walk away from? No, people need you. They need to see positive in their life. But this world is challenged by news that is negative, newspapers that are negative, social media that is either super above and beyond positive or ultra negative, so it doesn't allow you to balance like what is really going on in your life. That 1 second that you post for that picture on Facebook, and hey, I'm at some resort, it appears to be great, but you're miserable. So I think there's just all those things have been probably deepened in my mind. But I do think that the racial divide, I think the political divide, I think the religious divide, I think the sex divide has become a greater gulf, and I'm not looking for people to compromise, but let's have true conversations based off of what's out there versus what somebody's opinion is.
Now, I know I said one last question.
You're fine. You're fine.
I did want to ask you about your mom, because you have like generations of people that live with you. So I want to ask about your mom. How was that, were you afraid of, anything compromising her health?
Well, I think she was the first one to get it. And so, yeah, I think she was, but we were concerned because of the information they gave out to us, again, even being a big guy and my mom being older, that we're the ones that if we get it, we're going to suffer, the most and things of that nature. I think my mom, either she got it first or it didn't even, do anything a couple days and she was back on her feet. So I think I've seen, common colds do her worse than what the COVID did. So she did well. And I think, again, I think that those, and I'm still learning, I think that slowed her down a little bit. So, because I think as you get older, you got to keep moving. And I think for seniors, you look at them, they kind of, those years kind of probably aged them a little bit more because they weren't able to move. They weren't able to get out and experience and to be around each other. And I think that keeps them mobile. I think my mom, in probably the last 3 or 4 years, is probably moving a little slower in it. And I think that's been a more of a cliff, jump than a gradual decline.
So you think COVID-19 specifically didn't slow her down, but just the fact that she didn't have as much interaction to slow down.
Yeah.
That's something too. I do feel the same way. I've noticed that even with my mom, I think that that did more than I wish you even had COVID-19, which off topic too, but my niece had had it like 3 or 4 times in the household, and we like, okay, but I do feel that same way.
Yeah, and I mean even her being sick and just the recovery and rehabilitation, and after a while, because again we're humans, our mind tells us, hey, you know what, it's too late now. You might as well not. You had your chance. So we have to battle those things, especially when you're sick. Like, hey, I'm not going to get better, or those are really traumatic things that some folks have to deal with and had to deal with it alone, or not having a doctor, or not seeing other people that have recovered from a circumstance to say, okay, well, I see them recovering, I can do it. And I think those areas definitely have caused some rapid aging, some rapid decline from sicknesses that probably wouldn't have happened if COVID didn't happen. So,
lastly, do you have any photos, writing, artwork, or videos related to your experience in COVID-19 that you would like to be archived in this project?
I think I may have the my installation book, and I may even have the obituary book too. So I can definitely give those as something that happened during that course of time.
That would be great. Like, and are those copies, or
I think I have some copies somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I would definitely love to archive those. That'd be great. So, anything else that you wanted to share?
No, thank you for thinking enough of me to speak to me. I appreciate it. And you call me think I'm open. I think I'm quite closed. I can imagine what other people, but I think but you have to speak your truth, and but hopefully someday somebody will hear this and understand that when it's all said and done, there's a starting point and ending point to everything, except God.
Absolutely. And cut. We
Good.
got it. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Oh my.